In Conversation with Terry Shepard, award-winning broadcaster, narrator, and author. A deep dive into the writer's craft with the artists and support systems who create the stories we love.
Thank you, Lisa. Danielle Girard is the USA Today and Amazon #1 best-selling author of dark and addicting thrillers. Her stories have thousands of loyal readers. Several of her books are award winners, and 2 have been optioned for film. Her latest, Up Close, is book 3 in the Badlands series and reunites us with her intrepid detective, Kylie Milliard. Up Close is available everywhere on May 23rd. Danielle, welcome back to the conversation. Give us the 411 on Up Close.
So Up Close is a story of, obviously set again in the small town of Hagen, North Dakota, which has a population of about 800, 900 people. The 3 teenage children die sort of mysteriously in very different circumstances. One drowns in the fall, and then one drives a car into a plate glass window and is actually in a coma. And then the third is found in a ravine. And there's something going on with these teenagers, and the parents are freaking out. The town is freaking out, of course, right? Teenagers, it's all very terrifying. And Kylie is trying to figure out what is the connection and how to stop it before another teenager dies.
Danielle Girard and I have been friends for 5 years, and when you meet her, she is one of the most mellow, fun, and friendly souls you could imagine. And yet, she writes this tense, suspenseful stuff. How do you do it?
It's so true. And actually, when I was, my first book came out when I was 29, Terry, and somebody looked at me and was like, how does somebody with such a sweet face have such a dark mind? And it's sort of true. I don't know if it's worst case scenario thinking, which is something I always do, right? What can go wrong in this moment? Or maybe working out sort of my biggest fears, right? And having your kid die. I'm a mother of 2. You're a parent, having something happen to your child is really, it's the backbone of terror in my mind. And from my very first book, Savage Art, up to this book, there's oftentimes there's parental fear in my books.
The character of Kylie Milliard has evolved over the course of the Badlands series into its star. How did that happen?
Well, so, when I started the Badlands series, the first book is really about Lily Baker. And Lily Baker wakes up I know you know the story, that she wakes up on the edge of an overpass about to go over, and she has no idea who the driver of this car is, how she got there, who she is, anything. And so Lily is it's an amnesia story. She sort of recreates her past. And of course I needed the strong detective, but I also wanted her to be so Lily is a very fragile character. Of course, you can imagine, if you don't know who you are, it makes you it's a very scary proposition. I wanted a woman who would both mirror that and also, be the opposite of that. So, but the thing I love about Kylie is that she's not from Hagen, and Hagen is this tiny town. Everybody's born there. They live there forever. And Kylie comes in. She's the only female in the police department. She's a detective, and she's an outsider. And so she has her own set of sort of limitations. I like this about her because at first she wants nothing more than to prove herself so she can get back to home in Fargo and be a detective there. She doesn't want to be in Hagen. It's too small. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everything. And then over the course of 3 books, of course, that changes. The way we all change when we are somewhere for a certain amount of time. So it's been super fun to watch her grow, to go through this process with her. And there is a bit of a romantic interest in, it starts a tiny bit at the end of book 2, and then sort of it follows into this book. And I will not ruin it for you. I don't normally do a lot of romance. But it was really fun to have Kylie find somebody that she cares about.
We are in conversation with Danielle Girard. Her newest book is Up Close, the latest in her Badlands series. She hosts the Killer Women podcast on the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, where she interviews women who write today's darkest fiction. Her website is daniellegirard.com. There are some powerful romantic scenes in Up Close. Is it harder to write romance than suspense?
It's not the romance. I love interpersonal relationships. always. So I feel like that is not the problem. The problem comes with sex. I cannot write sex. I have done it. Chasing Darkness is the only real sex scene I've ever written. And then there's some sort of innuendo towards sex in the Schwartzman series, but I don't know why and I read it, it's in books and I think people do it, wonderfully. I never know if I need to speak about things in sort of like, I'm not even going to go there, Terry. You know what I'm talking about. It's just for me, it's a little awkward. I don't know if I have some inner prude or if I'm just worried about my mother reading the books. I don't really know. Or my children now. Yeah, I can't do sex.
Do you have situations where it feels like the story is flowing through you and not from you?
Absolutely. And those are the most magical, wonderful moments. I wish it happened all the time. There are moments where I feel like something's blocking the story, and it's probably because I'm going in the wrong direction or I'm not listening to the character. I'm being stubborn because I think I want something to happen a certain way. And the character who should be in charge is like, that is not going to work. That's not how this is happening. And so I have to shut up for a minute and let him or her tell me where I'm supposed to be heading. So absolutely, I don't feel in charge of it.
Why don't muses respect deadlines?
Well, because they're right. I think that's the trick, right? The muse knows. And if there's some way to just silence your active questioning brain, I can't do this. There's no way this book is going to work. I'm a failure. I don't belong here. I should never have been published the first time. I don't know, all that imposter syndrome and internal critic. If you can silence those people, which if you figure that out, let me know. I need help. That to me is when the muse can rise and do her job, which is to tell you what the story is.
You've been writing nonstop for over 2 decades. How do you think your storytelling has evolved during that time?
The way it's evolved is that the fears are different. The stories are different. I mean, I think it's evolved in all the ways that we learn about writing and therefore we get better. I always feel like, thankfully, to this point, every book I've written is better than the last book I've written. And I feel like Up Close is my best book. So I think that's part of Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours. You just get better. We understand the process more. It doesn't get easier, Terry, which is where I think it should. I keep waiting for it to get easier. But, I interviewed Sandra Brown on Killer Women, which is, my podcast. And she said every book she starts, she thinks, no way can I do this. I'm done. It's over for me. Can you imagine Sandra Brown, who's like 120 something or 30, maybe New York Times bestselling novels. And so if she feels that way, I feel like that's just the way it's going to be for us, Terry. There's no getting around it.
You've become a podcaster, host of the Killer Women podcast on the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. How have conversations with your fellow practitioners influenced you?
I think what I have learned, to be honest, is that the process, while hugely different for every single author, is in many ways a struggle for whoever. You're always sort of fighting with story and your conscious brain and your unconscious brain, and whether you're a pantser or a plotter or some combination. I've learned that it is just the way it works for all of us, is to find your own way, to dig in, to be patient, to be persistent. But what I've also learned is that it's an incredible joy to be able to do it. And that comes in every single interview I've had. And it's how I feel. I know it's how you feel, that getting to be a writer is such a gift. It's such a blessing. I feel I won the lottery.
We are in conversation with Danielle Girard, best-selling author and one heck of a storyteller. Her third entry in the Badlands series is Up Close, launching on May 23rd. Setbacks and rejection are part of every heroine's journey. How have you learned to deal with the word no over the course of your career?
Gosh, and I have so many rejections. So as you can imagine, if this is 23 years of this, and I love the idea that people think, well, once you get published, you don't get rejected anymore. I'm like, that's actually not how it happens. And I have back when I started trying to publish, it was all through snail mail. So I actually have a xylophone folder that is like, I'm making the fingers that are like 4 inches thick of my actual rejection letters, which I used to joke that I would make a coffee table book of or something. But now I have so many that are via email. I don't know how, I think the way I do it and I think the way a lot of people do it is you get to mourn, right? You get to be sad. You pull out the rosé and the ice cream and you do some damage, and you cry. And then you wake up the next day and think, okay, well, what else are you going to do? You've been doing this 23 years. You don't know how to do anything else. So you just go back and do it again. You call your writer friends because every one of them knows exactly what you're going through. I mean, you know this, right? You and I have had these conversations, whether it's my rejection or your rejection. We know that this is part of the business. And it's not personal, even when it feels, of course, horribly personal.
When I began writing fiction, it was a therapeutic exercise. But what's happened since is that I discovered this wonderful community of support who have encouraged me and many others to keep writing despite the revisions, the editorial feedback, and the challenges of getting published in a very competitive world. What motivates you to keep writing?
Well, I love that idea. I mean, the community is, and I was late to coming to the community. When I first published, first of all, I was really young. Like my first BoucherCon, I was 6 or 7 months pregnant with my son, and there weren't as many women around, and the ones that were sort of really successful already, like Lisa Gardner and Alafair Burke and Sandra Brown, and I was just this sort of newbie and massive whale of a newbie, and I remember just never feeling like confident enough to walk up and sort of get to know people. So I stayed out of the sort of conference arena for a really long time. I mean, really from like 2000 and I think I went to my last conference like 2006, and then I came back in 2016 into the world. And by then, of course, I was much more established. There were so many more women. I had a little more confidence. I was a little older, so I was able. And since then, the community is a huge part of my life. I mean, I think one of the things, I have an incredible community where I live, of course, but the writer community, the ability, you can text a writers group at 3 a.m. and somebody's awake to talk you off your ledge. That's just the way we are. My neighbor does not like to be texted at 3 a.m., but my writer friends are like, bring it. Somebody's up. But I think there was 1 year in there, Terry, when my kids were young and a lot was going on. I did not write that year. And that, I think, was the hardest year of my adult life. And I think for me, I write because I have to, because there's so much going on inside my head. There's so much that I have to process. And like you, I process it through writing, although I'm not writing about my own life. I'm not writing, nonfiction or even creative nonfiction. I'm writing fiction, but somehow writing about other people is a way of working through injustices in the world, and injustices in the way we feel in our own lives. And for me, it's a catharsis that I really am a crazy person without. And there's a lot of people who can attest to how insane I was that year. I didn't write, including my children. So we'll try never to do that again.
Well, and we can kill people and not go to jail. That's the best part about it.
Okay, now that you mention it, that's also a huge bonus. In fact, in my very first book, I had a terrible, terrible boss. And in my very first book, I got a little revenge, and I won't be very specific about that in case it gets back to that person. But it is very cathartic, and I agree. And I think it's, because the world is a really tough place, especially now. It gets tougher all the time. I feel like it's also a way to sort of create a real justice, at least in this tiny little corner of the world, which is a book. And so it doesn't spread the way we would hope justice does, but it does make me feel a little better that I can create this moment of justice, that I can make somebody feel good about the world and the way things could work out or should work out. And it's an escape for the way things really, when we're on this 24-hour news cycle, torturing ourselves with all the bad things happening, I think a little justice goes a long way in helping us keep our sanity.
The book is Up Close, available May 23rd, everywhere. Book 3 in the Badlands series is another winner for our guest, Danielle Girard. Thanks for the conversation.
Thank you.
In Conversation with Terry Shepard is a copyrighted presentation. All rights reserved. I'm Lisa Davis. Join Terry Shepard next time in Conversation.